Perrello, and welcome to the Philly Factor. Daily News sports beat reporter Phil Jasner has been called the best in the world of sports journalism. From 1981 until his death in 2010, Jasner was always on the case, going to extreme lengths to track athletes down for a quote or a story. He was known for his fair coverage of the Philadelphia 76ers, as well as some of their famous players, including World B. Free, Bobby Jones, Dr. J, Julius Erving, Moses Malone, Charles Barkley, and Allen Iverson. Well, there is a new book that has been released. It's entitled On the Case, His Best Writing on the Sixers, the Dream Team and Beyond. The book collects Jasner's writings throughout his career, including his coverage of baseball, the Eagles, the Philadelphia Adams soccer team, as well as Philadelphia Big Five college basketball. It's going through this book that you really understand why Phil Jasner was not only a sports writer, but a Hall of Fame sports writer with induction not into one, not two, but 6 Hall of Fames. Well, here to discuss his dad's work, as well as this book, is Andy Jasner, the son of the late Phil Jasner. Andy, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We talked right before the show. Your dad passed away
7 years ago, 2 days ago, December 3rd, 2010. It's hard to believe.
Yeah, where does the time go? And yet, it seems like, when a book like this comes out, you just dive into it head first because he tells so many great stories.
Indeed.
And, he wasn't just a writer. He wasn't just a 76ers beat writer.
Right.
He really was a sports journalist.
Oh, indeed, and there's chapters that predate the Sixers.
Yeah.
The Philadelphia Adams in 1973, when they won the North American Soccer League Championship. I was 4 years old.
Wow.
I was a ball boy for the team, and he treated that beat the same as he treated covering Allen Iverson. It wasn't any different. Coach Al Miller, to this day, he's like, he became such a friend with his hard work. It was just unmatched. I mean, the man worked 24 hours a day. It was unreal.
Yeah, and in reading about the Adams, I mean, I didn't even know that we had, I said, the Philadelphia Adams, where do they fall into the sports lineage?
Well, they still do a banquet every 5 years. So in another year will be 73, do the math, it'll be the 45th anniversary. I went to the last one and they treated Phil the same way as they did every player that they honored. I mean, it was really something to see.
Yeah. Before we get into where you came to find all these articles to include in the book, tell us a little about Phil Jasner, the man.
Oh boy, how much time do you have? I mean, that would take a long time. I mean, he just, from the time he was a little kid, and these are family members who told me, he said he was born to be a sports writer. It was the only thing he wanted to do. There wasn't anything second. And when he got to Temple and he worked with Merrill Reese, and Merrill did the radio, Phil did the writing, you just knew that there was a special career coming, and he just did. I mean, he loved chasing down stories. He loved telling stories that went way beyond the X's and O's, and he liked that too. But like, there's some in the book, like trying to prove that Dr. J could fly. And it was like a 6,000 word story that he must have worked on for months. And he just loved that. He was a very jovial person. He got stressed out on deadline like the rest of us, I'm sure, but just he was very devoted to family members, to our synagogue, to very close friends. But in the end, like his work was so special, and you could just see it wasn't a job to him; it was a dream, and he lived that dream every single day.
Yeah, in this era of sports journalism that we live in today, it seems that there are some writers that just thrive or live for the opportunity to get close and personal to some of the athletes. Allen Iverson spoke highly of your dad. So in his case, how was he able to maintain that balance between being a fan in many cases, and then being a reporter, where he had to report on some of these sports figures in Philadelphia?
Sure, and that was his job. And if you look at a theme through every player, coach who I interviewed to introduce each chapter, trust was a common theme. And Doug Collins said it best. Phil could write a hard-hitting story. He could criticize you without belittling you. And he did his homework. He did the work. He'd ask the hard question, but he didn't write it, he didn't ask it in a way that would make you feel bad about yourself or to question, any kind of integrity. The integrity was there, and he thrived on that. He wouldn't write a story until every I was dotted, every T was crossed. And believe me, Doug, Billy Cunningham, the theme was the same. Phil would write hard stories. If we had a bad stretch or a bad game, and he would critique us, but I wouldn't get upset because I knew that he did the work going in, he did the preparation, he was there, he knew what to ask, how to go about it, just have the integrity to do it, and that trust issue just it permeated through every chapter.
You mentioned deadlines, and any reporter, whether you're a crime reporter or a sports reporter, feature reporter, you're always working under those deadlines. Your dad, for the majority of his career, worked where there was no internet or Google search engine where you could type in somebody's
And they had
name.
a 4 a.m. deadline for a while, and he'd be up till 3:59. My bedroom was next to his office. I know that for a fact. I mean, he did not sleep very much, and when he did, he would sleep late. I mean, he would work until the last possible minute to get it right. I mean, and he just believed in that. That was, he couldn't go to bed without that.
Yeah. We think of Phil Jasner primarily as a Sixers, beat reporter, but he covered so many other things. And you mentioned, the Adams. He was also, out there at, the Big Five basketball
Absolutely.
games. Yeah.
I mean, Michael Brooks at LaSalle, he blanketed those Big Five schools. He was a Temple grad, but you would never know it. I mean, he covered every one of those schools like he was a proud graduate. He worked and worked and worked some more. And I know because I went to those triple headers at the Palestra. I went to McGonigal Hall and Heyman Hall, and I was on Hawk Hill. I was at every one of those games with him, so I know how hard he worked at it. And same thing with the Eagles. I mean, ask Dick Vermeil, ask Vince Papale, who I interviewed in the book. It was the same work ethic. And when he got that Sixers beat full time, it was full speed ahead. He didn't miss a beat, and right on into history there.
So how did he get the Sixers beat? I mean, does one apply for it? Does one politic for it? I mean, you figure, and in your dad's case, he had worked for a number of years as a sports reporter. What made him decide that this is something that he wanted, and how did he go for it?
Well, it's a very long story. I mean, he worked a number of beats, and he did cover Sixers games a lot prior to 1981. Even at the Trentonian, before he got to the Daily News, he was at the Spectrum, and he covered practices long before he started full time. And a position came open. Long story short, they wanted him for it. He was perfect for it, and the rest, as they say, is history. And he had a relationship with Billy Cunningham as well. Not that matters, but it was the same type of trust relationship, and it just worked. And once he started building sources, I mean, I go back to David Stern, and David Stern tells a great story. When Phil's first came on the beat, he called me every single day. He was so annoying, he called him. But you know what? I took his calls. No one else called me every day. He wanted to get everything right, and he just treated it like it was, beyond a job. And, and he was good at it. He loved basketball. I mean, as an Overbrook High graduate, and then through Temple, he just loved hoops, and he didn't want to switch, and he stayed on it until the very bitter end.
Yeah. Andy, what made you then decide that, hey, I have a book in me, or there's a book out there where I can compile many of my dad's stories into this book? What brought you to this point?
Well, I always wanted to. So my third daughter, Leah, was born September 21st, 2012. And right after she was born, I started thinking about it. I mean, he had this legacy which would never be changed or diminished in any way, but I'm like, how can I enhance it? And I started to get the idea, well, when the third baby comes along and you're kind of busy, you don't have a whole lot of time. So between the hours of midnight and 6 a.m., I kicked some ideas around, talked to some people, and and then there were snags, and there were moments where I pushed forward, and then I got some major momentum and started going through thousands and thousands of articles. Thankfully, my grandmother saved so many albums that helped me. I had help from a number of other sources, and I said, I want this legacy in print forever. He worked too hard and too long not to have it out there. As a freelance sports writer myself, I had the means to do it, and I had the ability, and thankfully Temple University Press stepped up, helped me, and again, it came out beautifully, and he'll be honored forever.
Yeah. Chances are when the layperson or the sports fan sits back and says, hey, I'm going to pick up this book and I'm going to read it, it must have been easy for Andy Jasner to put this all together.
No,
so,
it was not easy.
So, I mean, don't you just go to the Daily News archives and just glom through everything that's there?
A little bit, but you're talking about, I picked 60 articles with the publisher's help. You're talking about over 10,000, probably more than that.
Right.
And some I don't even know about. I mean, picking and trying, like, I could have spent another 2 years fine tuning, and I finally said, all right, this is my best 60. I moved a few around at the end, but I wanted a sampling of every chapter, showing the kind of work ethic, showing the kind of, the writing and the themes that just went from beginning to end in a 4-decade plus Hall of Fame career. And it was not easy. I mean, I labored over the selections, and I put my heart, my soul, I put every ounce of energy I had, which wasn't always easy to do at 3:30 in the morning,
of course,
into getting it done. And I'm very comfortable with the select. I'm sure there's others out there.
Yep.
I mean, when you write that many, of course. I mean,
and I'm sure people must stop you and say, hey, why didn't you include this? Or I remember the article that he...
I haven't gotten a lot of that. I get people still calling me Phil, which is what I wrote about. And I never correct them. I'm on vacation with my family and someone says, hey, Phil, the Sixers making a trade? I don't correct them, because I just, like, if that's how they want to remember, that's fine.
Yeah.
I think it's 7 years later, it is just unbelievable that people still do that. And just the feedback I've gotten, people are reliving memories, and if I'm giving them, a little bit of, reading excitement and over the holiday season, if that's my little thing that I'm doing, I'm happy about that. That's terrific.
As I mentioned a moment ago, we associate Phil Jasner primarily with the Philadelphia 76ers. Was that his, ideal assignment, or was he really maybe an Eagles? Yeah, he really had more of a leaning toward football, or was it all sports? Or when you fall into this this assignment to cover the Sixers, you could see and read the passion that he had for the Sixers. But did he like one sport over the other, or?
I would say basketball was probably his favorite sport. But if you read that Adams chapter and you talk to those players and those coaches, you would never have known that. If you talk to those Eagles coaches and those Eagles players, like Vince Papale, you would have never known it. I mean, he did love basketball. He loved all sports, but it really was a perfect beat for him ultimately. And it's not easy. The grind of the NBA with the travel that's involved and the amount of copy that you have to file and the reporting is really, really difficult. I mean, I'm not knocking any other sport, because nothing's easy. In the NFL, there's only 16 games. There used to be 14.
Right.
82 games, and when you're good, if you go through to the finals, as the Sixers did, in the 80s there a number of times, it's a long, one season can be difficult. Beat writers today will be like, I don't know how he did that for 3 decades.
Yeah.
Because it really is, you have to love what you do, and to work at that level that he worked at was really just amazing.
I want to mention that Andy Jasner himself has quite the career. He's a freelance sports writer whose work has appeared in the Associated Press, the New York Times, the Boston Globe, and Hoop Magazine, among others. He's also the author of the book Baltimore Ravens. So you yourself know what it takes to go into writing an article, writing a book. How easy, difficult, challenging was it to write about a subject, your dad, so close to you?
Well, it wasn't easy. I say to everybody, it was very therapeutic, though. I mean, I lost my mom in 2006 after my first daughter was born to lupus. And then my dad suddenly got ill and passed in 2010. And my second baby, Shira, who's now 7, was maybe 9 months old then. And it was just, it was crushing to lose both parents in a short amount of time.
Sure.
And, I mean, I needed some time, and once I had some separation and some time, I was able to do it. But I'll go back to Dad's funeral, which to this day, and probably always will be the hardest thing I ever had to do when I planned that whole event. And the director of the funeral home came to me and said, you're going to have to send some of these people home. There's too many people. It's a fire code issue. And I said, I am not sending anybody home. If people came to honor him, you have to figure it out. Samuel Dallenberg flew 3,000 miles to pay his respects. I was like, you're going to send him home? No, we're not doing that. So once I had some separation and some time, and You know, it's never going to be easy,
Yep.
but getting this in print is really, it's just been therapeutic, and I'm sure it will continue to be.
Were there any hurdles that you had to clear, like for copyright, or even some of the photos that are in the
sure.
book? Yeah,
Sure.
So, yeah, that comes with the territory, I guess. But was everybody pretty much on board? They said, "Hey, this is a great idea, Andy," and they were, willing to give you the thumbs up and say, "Yeah, you have permission to use that."
Oh yeah, I mean, I got a lot of help. I mean, yeah, there were some hurdles. It wasn't always easy. You know, some of the photos that I was looking at were a long time ago. So I mean, I don't know about the archives, and I'm sure that was tricky on their end. But I'm just thankful for everybody's help, from the Philadelphia Daily News, Philadelphia Media Network, the Trentonian. I could go on and on, for everybody just lending a hand to help me get this done, because I could not have gotten this in print without their help. And this continues a legacy, and it will, when anybody says anything to me, I'm humbled, I'm honored, I'm overwhelmed. People buy copies. Like I heard from Wilt Chamberlain's sister, she texted me the other day and she bought a bunch, and it's just wonderful. It really just warms my heart to know that people are getting some enjoyment out of this.
When you talked about some of those scrapbooks that your grandmother had that you used as a resource.
Yes,
Yeah.
I mean, without those, I don't know that I would have gotten a lot of the early articles like that Philadelphia Jewish Times from 1962. I mean, you're talking a long time ago.
Yeah.
And some of those Trentonian articles from the early 70s, 1970, 71, 72. And there were others that I could have picked that I didn't pick as well. Montgomery newspapers. I mean, there was he did an entire high school football section.
Wow.
In the late 60s. I mean, he worked as hard on that as he did on Allen Iverson going to the finals in 2001. Nothing changed. The only thing that changed was the venue, the athletes, and just the level of play. But it was really, I think the coolest thing for me was going back through those articles, learning some things that I didn't know, reliving things, and just being a part of, this isn't just a Hall of Fame sports writer, this was my dad.
Yeah.
And I got a chance to kind of relive memories that just did so much for me as well.
Yeah, my follow-up question then is, when you went back into these early days before you were born. I mean, when you were following your dad and going to the games, whether it was the Goal Arena or Heyman Hall back then.
I was there.
I mean, so you saw your dad,
yeah.
work and pursue the story. But in those early days, when you went through those scrapbooks, was there an aha moment where you found an article, or you read an article, or saw something that said, "Gee, never in a million years did I ever expect this from my dad"?
Well, no, because the expectation was there because of the work ethic. I will say probably the biggest article that stands out was from 1987, and that was when he tried to prove that Doc could fly. And I mean, he must have worked on that for months, and he talked to doctors and scientists and physicists, and the last two lines of the article were, because he was still a kid and a fan at heart, "I will always believe that Doc could fly, and that is what I will tell my grandchildren someday." And I get the chills thinking about it. When I read that for the first time, I was a senior in high school that year. I didn't know. You don't pay attention back then.
Yeah.
But now, with 3 kids and his grandchildren, like it gives me chills.
Yeah. There's a great photo of your dad on the front of the front cover of the book with Julius Erving, Dr. J, there on the floor. And it's so moving. There's Dr. J after a game. Your dad.
That's training camp at Franklin and Marshall with the Sixers, 1982.
1982.
The National Geographic did a story on Doc that was printed the next year in '83. So I had to go into their archives to get permission for this.
Okay.
But that's how Doc trusted him. That picture says 1,000 words, and he trusted Doc.
Yeah. From your background as a sports journalist, that trust between reporter and athlete, do you still see it today, or is that something of a bygone era because it was a different time, different place, different world? Do you see that trust like is demonstrated on the front cover of your book?
Not to that level, and I think that social media, Facebook, especially Twitter, has really just watered the industry down. It's just, people who know me know I'm not a Twitter fan. I use it, but it's just, once Twitter gets going, after every Sixers loss, fire Rep Brown. Like, it's just, there's such a reaction that coaches, I think, tend to worry. I don't know if the trust level is as high as it used to be. I'm sure that there are some for the really hardworking journalists. Sure, coaches trust them, absolutely. Otherwise, there would be a problem. But it was just different back then. There was less. There might have been more reporters, but there was less of the noise, and by that I mean the social media noise that you see today. And it's got to be hard. Imagine if you're a coach and after every loss, people are calling for you to get fired. I mean, it's crazy.
But wasn't that always the case before, but it wasn't as vocal? So
Probably.
They may have tuned into a talk radio or sports talk radio program and they would vent their frustrations there, or maybe it was the corner bar where people were saying
Sure.
that. But I think as you mentioned, with social media today, it's been ratcheted up to such a level
no question.
that it's kind of scary at times.
Oh, and really, and like Paul Westhead told me from the early years, when he was a high school coach, before he ever got to college, he said this crazy guy with the curly hair was coming in. He looked like, he had these wild eyes, and he had a million questions, but the questions were accurate.
Yeah.
No other reporter in town was coming at me with those types, so he would wait till everybody else was done. He'd pull me aside, and I answered them. I might not have liked them, but I answered them, and there was a trust issue, and every single person from A to Z who I interviewed in this book said the same exact thing: trust.
When you look back at your dad's career, number one, he was your dad.
Absolutely.
How was Phil Jasner, the sports reporter, different than Phil Jasner, the dad?
Well, everybody's different. I mean, I think everybody, you wouldn't be human if you didn't have six sides to you. I mean, sure. I mean, I always yelled at him, take a vacation, and he just didn't relax the way he should have. I'm like, and he loved the shore. I'm like, go. He's like, but Ann, there's the story. I'm like, I understand that. And he was just so, I wish he had taken more time to do things like that he didn't. But you don't get in 6 halls of fame without that. And I've said that too. I mean, including the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield, Mass. I mean, that's no small feat.
Sure.
I mean, not that any of them is a small feat, but that is no small feat. And he just, I mean, that's he wanted to be the best, and he wouldn't rest until he was.
Was there ever a story or an athlete or an interview that he wished he would have gotten, or he just was not at the right place at the right time? Maybe it was early in his career, or did he ever, say, "Gee, I'm not going to go on vacation because there's a game or there's a story that I got to pursue"? Was there ever an opportunity that he missed?
I don't think so. He would get mad when he had an idea and either somebody refused to call him back. And I remember this. This is funny to this day, and I don't remember the exact circumstances. And I was working for CBS Sports at the time.com, and we covered the NBA Finals together in Seattle. It was the Sonics against the Bulls. The Bulls won in 6. And I forget exactly why. Master P was doing the national anthem, and he had some kind of Philly connection. I don't remember what, but I was sharing a room with Dad to save money for my company, and he called like 2 days. He wouldn't call him back, and he got finally, my dad got so many, slammed the phone down. He's like, the heck with him. He was just offended that somebody wouldn't get back. That's what drove him nuts. If he's going to do the work, he expected you. It may not be the next day. He expected a return phone call.
Sure.
And I chuckle at that because it was funny to watch him. He went crazy on that for 2 full days.
Yeah.
Everybody else is worried about this. And that was his 9th story in the paper too.
Yeah.
I mean, he had everything else covered. We're all going out to dinner. I'm like, are you coming? He's like, no, I got to make one more call. I'm like, there was always one more call. I mean, but that's just the way he was. He could never turn it off.
Yep. What do you take away from Phil Jasner, the sports reporter? I mean, here you are working in the same arena as your dad. So what's the takeaway for you as a result of this book, but even looking back at his career?
Well, number one, every time I walk into the Wells Fargo Center or the Palestra, I still look up and say a little prayer. That'll never change. I do the same thing before tip-off. I mean, I sit in his seat in the press room, and it's just, it's a very cool thing. Not every child has an opportunity to do that from a parent. It's very unique. And the integrity, the work ethic, the desire to be right. I mean, it doesn't matter how many words you write if you have factual errors, because then what point is your story? Double check your facts, do the extra homework to get it right. Deadline's hard, I get it, you have to get it in. And if you make a mistake, don't worry about it, correct it, don't sit on it. I mean, the very first big game, I should say, I ever covered was Duke, Kentucky at the Spectrum in '92. Christian Laettner dropped that nice shot there at the buzzer. I had about 8 minutes before my newspaper in North Carolina to file my story, and I don't remember what I wrote to this day. And the next day, you know, I took my time. I wrote like 5 stories. I checked and double-checked everything, and you know, when you have a moment like that, if you don't chronicle it properly, there's no point. I will always have that integrity for as long as I work in this profession.
In the minute that we have left, Andy, what is it you hope that fans of your dad, people who read this book, what do you hope they take away from this?
Oh, I hope they just get a nice lifetime of memories. And when someone's kind enough to ask me to sign it, I will say enjoy the memories. And there were so many, so many over so many sports and so many years. And if that gives them a little enjoyment over the holidays, on an airplane ride, or you know, with their family or whatever it may be, that makes me feel good. You know, again, it was very therapeutic, and you know, I hope if I help just a little bit, I've done well.
Yeah. Again, the name of the book, and I encourage everybody to go out and pick up a copy of the book. It is On the Case. His best writing on the Sixers, the Dream Team, and beyond, by Andy Jasner. It is now available, again, On the Case. And Andy, I want to thank you.
My pleasure, Paul.
Congratulate you on a wonderful book, and I look forward to diving into this even further.
Appreciate it. I'll take any questions you have after the fact.
Very good. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
All right. Until the next time, thanks so much for tuning in to The Philly Factor. My name is Paul Perrello. Thanks for being with us.